Here at The Regenerative Journey, we know that good health is related to good food and good practices, but understand that sometimes the right food choices are quite hard to put into place. But our good buddy, Cindy O'Meara at the Nutrition Academy, is helping people break old habits to create a much healthier lifestyle. So in support of what she's doing, we're offering a $100 discount to all our listeners. Simply enrol in their functional nutrition course and enter the coupon Charlie100, that's Charlie100. The Nutrition Academy, say goodbye to old food habits and hello to a much healthier, happier life.
I just think you lose all your innocence about that. And you do think, I don't know how long I'm here for. So you're kind of broken in a way. You're not innocent anymore. You do think, I don't know how much time I'll be here for.
That was Amelia Nolan, and you're listening to The Regenerative Journey. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and internationally, and their continuing connection to country, culture, community, land, sea and sky. And we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging.
G'day, I'm your host Charlie Arnott, an 8th generational Australian regenerative farmer. And in this podcast series, I'll be diving deep and exploring my guests' unique perspectives on the world so you can apply their experience and knowledge to cultivate your own transition to a more regenerative way of life.
Welcome to The Regenerative Journey with your host, Charlie Arnott.
Quick plug for our workshops coming up in December. The first one is at the farm at Byron Bay in the Northern Rivers of New South Wales on the 2nd and 3rd of December. And then our next one is the next week, 7th and 8th of December at Hanamino here at Boorowa in the Southern Slopes of New South Wales. It's our 2-day Introduction to Biodynamics course. Theory in the morning, practical in the afternoon. It's 2 days. Jump on charliearnott.com.au, the events page there, to book your tickets. Sneak these workshops in before the end of the year, before the festive season, and hope to see you there. G'day, this week's episode is with Amelia Nolan. We sat here on the veranda of the cottage at Alkina Wine Estate in the Barossa. It's the afternoon of day 2 of our one of our 2-day Introduction to Biodynamics courses. We ran here, and Amelia and Dan and Tim and Johnny kindly hosted that for us. Amelia and I chatted about her life, her country upbringing, moving to the UK, her interest in wine and that industry, and then coming back to Australia to make wine herself. We talked about the really unique way that she and her team are identifying soil and rock and really doing a wonderful job of emphasising the terroir, which is a word used often in wine circles to sort of explain how wine can reflect the landscape. But these guys have taken it to another limit. And what was wonderful, if I can get my little text here right, the soil and rock informs the texture and taste, and they are doing that in spades. It was a wonderful couple of days I'd had here. Fantastic chat with Amelia, and look, I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I did with Amelia Nolan. It's a big shadow too.
It is.
Okay.
It's long.
Amelia, we're on. We've been recording your giggles.
Oh, okay. That's nice.
We welcome Amelia Nolan to the Regenerative Journey podcast. We're sitting here at Alkina Wine Estate in the wonderful Barossa Valley. I've been here a few days now doing a couple of things which are not as important as what you're going to tell me in the next little while. Welcome to the veranda of the cottage here at Alkina, Amelia.
Thank you, Charlie. It's lovely to be here with you. It's not an overly warm experience, but
it's a bit fresh.
It's very nice to be here, and the sun is setting in the west, as we would expect.
Imagine if it was setting in the east. Whoa!
It'd be interesting. It'd be different.
We'd have some explaining to do.
Yep, we'd be somewhere else.
So tell me, talking about somewhere else, I want to talk about where we are.
Yes.
We are looking to the west. The sun is setting. We're looking at some beautiful vines. We are in a vineyard, and we're also looking at the wonderful, very old,
50s?
1950s, is
Yeah.
it? I thought it was a bit older than that.
No.
Is it?
No.
Oh. Anyway, it looks old.
Yeah.
I've been in there for a few days now. I love it.
It's old enough. It's older than me.
Is it?
Just
Well, that
no.
wouldn't be hard.
Well, no, 1950s, we believe that vineyard out there was planted by Les Kaleski, one of the old Greenock families, pioneers of this area.
The Kaleskis?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, yep. There are many of them, and they, one of the actually the first family to settle here was the Schultz family, which is a fairly common name.
So Marcus, who was at the course,
Is
he one of them?
Schultz is like Smith.
Yeah, in the
So,
German
in the
world.
German world.
So for those who are not familiar with the Barossa Valley, predominantly settled by Germans.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How far back?
1830s to 1850s.
Yeah, a fair while ago.
Yeah. Well,
They've been here a while.
they've been multi-generational, consistent people here, but there's a deep tradition because of those many generations of German people from that time of settlement. Obviously, there were people here before that, which we're very aware of, and for thousands and thousands of years.
We'll get to that.
Yes,
I want to touch
absolutely.
on that.
Yeah.
So Kaleski family grew. I knew that they'd been here for a while, but I didn't realise they may have planted some of those vines there. That's cool.
Yep. Les and his wife Laura planted them, and their daughter did tell me that Peter Lehman, famous winemaker from this area, was very much in love with the vines on that ridge that you can see through there, and he used to come out here every year and inspect them, and Laura would make him an apple cake, a very special apple cake, and he would inspect the vines and he would take the fruit every year. He loved them.
I love the culture involved in winemaking and grape growing. It's just which again we'll probably touch on, but it's no doubt part of your story. So tell me, Amelia, we're here. Why are we here? Why are you here? And and you've sort of started to explain what we're looking at. What's the significance of what we're looking at to you?
I suppose being here is the point that I'm at with my journey so far in the wine world and in life, and it's been, I suppose, 30 years now in the wine business, and also as a country Australian, I'm looking out and thinking I started my life just out of a small country town in the southeast called Narracourt. I was born into a sheep farming family and on a farm that my great-grandfather established. And so Dad was third-generation sheep farmer down there, but he wasn't that mad about sheep. So
It's fun, isn't it?
he actually didn't like them at all, I don't think.
But he was a sheep farmer.
No, he changed to small seed cropping originally, Lucerne, and then went to grapevines at about the time that I started working in the industry, which was early 90s, when Australia was at the point of really beginning that incredible wave of export success. So I went to Roseworthy, which
Wine
is
exporting.
yeah. Big companies making good, consistent, branded products of wine. So the big brands like Jacobs Creek and Hardy's, who I worked for, were just beginning to expand into international markets, and we were seeing Australian wine on the shelves of British supermarkets and American supermarkets at reasonable prices, and it was the flavour of the month for a while.
So the world was discovering Australian wine.
It was, yeah. And it was a very exciting time to enter the industry, actually, because it was, and I got a job working specifically in what was called the export department of Hardy's. And as a sort of 23, 24-year-old, you know, we weren't particularly paid much, but we were given the opportunity to travel all over the world to meet with just a vast number of people in different roles within the wine and hospitality and retail industry, and it was an extraordinary period of time, and it was a great university. So that's sort of where I started that. But you know, happy country childhood, which was great, and didn't really know what to do after school. And Dad said, "Oh, why don't you get into the wine industry, because that's sort of interesting." And he was getting into grapes, so I did that. And yeah, it was a fascinating. I worked for Hardy's during my 20s here, but travelling constantly around the world.
When you were working with them,
with Hardy's, yeah, and really developing. I was working in the big branded side of wine, and I really, really wanted to not be in Australia for my whole life. I had this real yearning and this calling to live overseas, and it took me a while to convince them to let me go, but someone in the UK office went on maternity leave, and they said, "All right, well, you can go, but you've got to be back in 6 months." So I said, right.
Still working for them, but based over there.
Yeah. And that was great. So I'd also met a guy in England who was, you know, I mean, he was living in France, but that was kind of close to England. So it seemed like a you know, kind of multiple benefits involved.
Is this the guy I met the other day?
Yeah.
Just checking you weren't talking about some old boyfriend that then, you then broke up with and then...
No, I probably would have left that one out of it, but I can go there if you like.
I don't know.
It could be.
How much does Russell know?
Oh, pretty much everything. I haven't told him, but...
Well, this is the forum to do it.
Yeah, thank you.
He won't listen to this, I'll never know.
I bet he does. So, yeah, where was I?
You got to England.
Yeah, I got to England.
Spotted this.
At the age of 28, which is Hamish has explained to us as the time of change in many people's lives. Jumped on a plane and headed over there, and with one bag, and I got back 11 years later with a lot more than one bag. A lot of baggage. No.
Russell's got baggage. He's a good cook.
He is. He's very good. He's very good.
Nice bloke.
Yeah. So fascinating opportunity. I think why it was so incredible for me to get to London and start working was that I realised very quickly how crap I was at my job, at business. It's a very cosy environment, working out of a nice office in a vineyard south of Adelaide and travelling around the world and sort of telling people what to do at the ripe old age of 26. But when you get into one of was essentially a regional office, I had to go out and actually start selling the wine to hard-ass customers like Tesco and Sainsbury's. And I had to work out very quickly that, a bit of Aussie charm and charisma really wasn't going to cut it with these people. They just didn't care. And that the accent was really not that interesting because there'd been so many Aussies in England in London for so many decades that it just wasn't interesting, and it wasn't a point of difference.
So was that a bit of a rude shock then? You thought you were going to just nail it?
I thought I was going to nail it completely, and actually just found myself way further down the organisational chart than I'd actually thought I was going to be. And it was the best thing that ever happened because I actually learnt how to take notice of people in business who were good at it, and start to understand how to function and present myself and interact with big customers, write detailed plans, start to get my head around actually what business strategy looks like at the professional end of it. And it was a really interesting time. It wasn't easy. And then a big American company came along and bought the Australian company I was working for. So
it wasn't Hardy's over there?
Constellation, who are a big American drinks company, came along and bought Hardy's, and we were absorbed into that, which was, again, I fell even further down the organisational chart.
You're a smaller fish in a bigger pond.
Yeah, I was. And that was interesting. And, of course, you go through these huge corporate restructures and they take months and months and no one knows what they're doing. But it was all really worthwhile. And I stayed around and did that for another couple of years. And then I was asked by a British company, a wine distributor that I was really respected over there, to go and run a joint venture company that they had with an Argentinian family-owned company, very well respected, and it was a brand. It was running this joint venture company owned by these two companies, and it was a brand that I'd long admired, and so I made that change in 2006, and it was that was interesting, really interesting, and it sort of led to where I am now.
What was interesting about that?
Well, it was an interesting time because I got to work for people who were brilliant, really brilliant. Like, this was next level up from where I'd been, and they owned the company, and they made they made me think even more in a huge big picture way. And again, I was travelling a lot still down to South America. And I got to understand and experience the South American way of doing things, which was very different to my Anglo-Australian way that I've been brought up with. And it took, I suppose, it took a time to adjust to how that works, but you have to fit in with that, and it's been a really interesting. I don't speak Spanish, but it has been a really interesting process for me to work with South American people over these last 15 years.
So tell me about the differences, or what are the considerations, or is it about the language? Obviously, different language, but in the way you use the language, is it the etiquette? Is it the sort of the attitude?
Yeah, look, I think there's all of that. What I think is always interesting is the time that it takes to make. It takes sometimes longer to make decisions, but what I've found is that actually we often rush decisions.
So they're probably
and we end up making fast decisions. And I think in some ways what I really appreciate about that culture is that there's sometimes a bit more time. But I was still working for an English company, and I learned a lot from some very clever people. My boss in particular was someone who's been in the British company who has been enormously influential in the way I see things still, and he really taught me how to think about business. And I think I grew up in those years in England. I had a fairly serious health issue when in the middle of all of that, which is relevant really to mention because I think it's informed quite a lot of my views on things now, and the regenerative side of things and the health side of things. Can
we go into that? Or
of course, yeah. No,
that is not an uncommon thing that I've found, is that people's journeys are often informed and those turning points are the result of ill health or some fairly big tension event. Whether
Yes.
it's
It was actually right at the start of when I just moved from the Constellation company to Bibendum. So it was quite a big test, I think, on the new employer in a way. No, I had a rare ovarian cancer. I was 33, and it happened when we were in Paris one weekend. It's sort of, a lot of pain, and then of course a lot of back in London, a lot of tests and trying to work out what was going on, and surgery, and then waiting for results, and then unfortunately 3 months of chemo, which was probably that was the hardest part of it all, because it was a fairly it was a curable cancer. It's not the same as the ovarian cancer that is what older women get, although some younger women do as well. It's a slightly different histology. It was curable, but the chemo was brutal. So I just hadn't filled out my private health insurance paperwork. Whoa. And so for the first time in my life ever, I didn't have private health insurance. So I spent these 3 months in and out of, thankfully it was very close to where we lived, but a very tough London cancer ward. And I think that was had more impact on me than the cancer itself. It was getting ill and then losing your hair and half your body weight, which just being so ill and so much time to think about one's own mortality, and so it was a tough time.
And time off work.
Yeah, only the time that I had to have the treatment, I kind of got straight back into it as soon as that was finished, and I did try and work through it quite a bit. It was sort of my sanity, and it was a new job, and Bibendum were amazing to me, and you always remember these things, but I think as soon as I was finished the treatment, I sort of said, right, well, I'm well again, and I'm out of here. And I did start travelling and working in a fairly crazy way, like as if I was running out of time or something. I don't know. But you do. Everyone responds differently to these situations.
Well, did you, was your mortality you reflected on, as you said, was that a catalyst for I could go tomorrow, I nearly did, or time was ticking. What were you thinking differently or doing differently?
I just think you lose all your innocence about that, and you do think, I don't know how long I'm here for. So you're kind of broken in a way. You're not innocent anymore. You do think, I don't know how much time I'll be here for. So I think how you react to these situations is often unravels over time, and you eventually, and I don't even think about this it really anymore, but if we look back, I sort of have to include it in the discussion because it did form what happened. I think it did sort of impact on what happened to me afterwards, and I knew I wanted to do whatever I wanted to do. I wanted to do something that would be interesting and fascinating, and also that I thought would make a contribution to the well-being of an industry, the well-being of a place, and that I sort of could see that down the track I wanted to work on a different part of the wine business than perhaps where I'd come from, which was much more, I I suppose, FMCG sort of, retail fast.
What's FM? Sorry.
Fast-moving consumable goods.
Yeah, right.
So the wine industry really is, you could split it in two parts. You've got branded wines that you'll see in supermarkets, and that's primarily where I'd been. And it was great. I mean, huge learning experience. We need those wines. That the industry there's a huge, many jobs, and around the world dependent on that. But then there's this other end of the wine business, which is fine wine and more crafted, more artisanal, more intellectual wines, I suppose. And I think that I wanted to get to that place. Eventually, it took a while, and I needed to work through what I was working on at the time. But we did eventually get to the point where we wanted to move back to Australia. So that was going to initiate a whole set of changes, and that was after I had our first child in London. George was born in end of 2010, and we were there until I was pregnant again with Ned, and I knew that I needed to come home to raise my family back in my own country, and I also just needed some sunshine. I just
11 years.
Yeah, and there were 6 really, really lame summers, and I needed to.
Do they ever have any good ones?
They actually do, and London on a good summer's day is like nowhere else on earth. But they only happen about once a year.
Just back to I guess that catalyst. Was that a good thing when you look back? Not good as in fun, but good as in, if that had not happened, your life trajectory would have been no doubt different.
Yeah, I think. I think it's I look back on it as a very positive experience. Ultimately, I mean, I'm still here, and I do think it was something that was meant to happen, and that would serve me well in the future. And I think it was completely what was meant to be for me.
Well, Hamish, for those I hadn't mentioned it before, Hamish Mackay and I have just completed a 2-day introduction to biodynamics here at Alkena, and Amelia and Dan and Tim and Johnny have kindly hosted the 2 days, which we are most grateful for, and what a lovely venue to do it in, with a room full of mainly, grape growers, winemakers, a few farmers and a few gardeners. Hamish did mention that, didn't he? He mentioned that, sickness and challenges in our life are often not even just good for us, but sometimes we not sure we make them happen to ourselves, but they're sort of things that are potentially part of our fate or part of our journey, which have they're there for that catalytic change.
Yeah, he did, and I was obviously listening with interest, and I completely understand it, and did understand what he was talking about. It made total sense to me, and I think there's no doubt. And it was really interesting to hear that, if you don't listen the first time, maybe there's another message. Yeah. So I'm saying
a little bit louder, a little bit more.
Thank you very much.
But you're right, though. It gets back to say. I mean, I didn't say it at the time, but I was thinking about what's a seasonal flu. It's something that, the flu. I mean, putting COVID and all that stuff aside, but that's the body going, you are overworked, overstressed. I'm going to hit you with something that's going to put you on your ass, put you into bed for a day, or put you on the couch because you need to rest, because you're not reading the subtle signs. So the signs and the challenge that is put to us is much less subtle, and then we go, actually, I can't even move. I need to go to bed. These things are sort of all part of our journey and the challenges that our body need in some ways to physically, but also mentally. And clearly, your physical challenge was a good thing for your mental state.
It was. I think. It also doesn't play out immediately afterwards. You sort of store it up a bit, and you get on and carry on, and you do whatever you are doing at that age and stage of your life. But it's just really with you in that. When the time comes, I think you have more clarity about what direction you think you need to take.
You've got a different filter, like a
Yeah,
subconscious
maybe.
filter
Yeah.
to run decisions through, is it? Or
Yeah, I think you do.
fork in the road?
I think you procrastinate less. Perhaps you make clearer decisions. You have clarity. Perhaps, but I think it took a while for the sort of next steps to crystallise, and you're not in control, so you have to. There's a bit of luck and timing and everything that comes into all these things, and I certainly feel I had both of those for the next steps in moving back here and selling Argento, the company I was running, to Alejandro Bulgaroni, who owns this property and who I continued to work for when we got down here, and has been, placed an extraordinary trust in me to develop something in the Barossa for him, and it's just been an incredible 6 years of doing what we've done, of building the team here, of a lot of challenges, but I suppose learning how to farm without all of the support systems that conventional farmers have, learning how to make wine, learning how to make wines that are without some of the artefacts that people are dependent on to make wine that they think they have to make because the market wants it.
Artefacts.
Oh,
is that a fancy word for additives?
No, yeah,
Or,
sort of. Yeah. It's a word that means oak and basically new oak, and lots of, it's what I call the overtones in winemaking. So all the things that you think are going to make you stand out, and the winemaker has come along like a sort of hero and made this incredible wine, and it was all his doing, and then he put it in new oak, and it's sort of all the fancy stuff. And what Alberto Antonini, who's been an incredible guide to us here, what he has really taught me is to have the confidence to do less. And that's been a key learning for me here. And that's really his words and the time that he spent here helping me and the team understand how to do less.
So he is the winemaker?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Everyone's name starts with an A in this company. No, Alejandro's the owner, and Alberto is the guy who oversees all of the winemaking for Alejandro's group of wineries around the world. And he's based in Italy, but he does come out here 3 times a year, and he doesn't at the moment, obviously. We do it over Zoom. But he's been here from the beginning in helping and guiding me and helping us with the kind of vision of what we want this place to create. And I was talking about today, he was the person who said, dead soil makes dead wine. And that we need to, if we want to make great wine, our vines have to be plugged into the earth, because otherwise with that we won't get the energy and the reflection of the rocks and the landscape in our wines. And that's been a huge learning process, and a hugely rewarding as well, because I think it's, we go back to that word over and over again of authenticity, and I think it's becoming a word it's a word that's becoming very important in this world, and I don't want to do anything anymore that's not authentic.
you mentioned just before there, Amelia, that, and it's sort of really interesting to hear it, that you said that he gave you confidence to do less.
Yes.
Which is very reflective of, I guess, jumping to regenerative agriculture, regenerative farming, that sort of different way of farming, and David Marsh is someone who I always reference here, one of my mentors at Barossa Valley. He says, it's often the things you do less of or stop doing have the most impact. You know, what are some of the things that you have are not doing that maybe other wine makers and grape growers are doing? What are some of those things you've just, which sounds like a pretty cool thing?
Yeah,
like you actually do less and maybe more happens.
Well, I think we're still learning. It's still a journey, but I think it certainly starts in the vineyard. I mean, doing less in terms of less herbiciding means. I mean, obviously we're organic and biodynamic certified, so we don't kill off and then fill it up with artificial stuff. I mean, that's sort of baseline stuff. But when it comes to winemaking, it's having the confidence to bring the grapes in, and we use a lot of whole bunch, so we just sort them on the sorting table. We get them into the concrete tanks that you've seen up there, and we didn't ever bring a commercial yeast product in. And that's into a winery that had never been used as a winery before. So
this is from the last 6 years?
The first vintage, which was 2017.
Yeah.
So we just made a little bucket of grapes, and you put a bit of hessian over the top, and eventually it starts to bubble away. And then you put that into another tank, and it just starts to.
That's the sort of the original, the mother. Is that the sort of the inoculant or whatever?
Yeah, well, it's just wild yeast.
Yep.
That's come off the grapes and off from the atmosphere.
In the air, yeah, cool.
So, and it took a while, and I was sort of starting to think, maybe we need to, but it's somebody.
Gee, go to the supermarket.
Can
get
we
some
just?
yeast in the
Yeah,
bag.
can someone sell me a product here?
And you'd never made wine to this point.
Well, I hadn't been as hands-on, but I've been in and around wineries here and in Mendoza and Bordeaux,
but not necessarily responsible.
Not necessarily responsible for the winemaking. So, and Alberto again just said to me, "You'll be fine." I said, "But I haven't got a winemaking qualification." Yeah. He said, "No, it's better if you're not qualified, because then I don't have to unlearn you with all that stuff. You can just, you have to be careful. You have to be watching.
There's, I'm sure there are principles.
Of course there are, yeah. And it'd be foolish to ignore that. But we did get off on this path of fermentation, and then you need to go through secondary fermentation, and that's a more complicated process to get started. But again, didn't happen. But eventually, we didn't have to inoculate with a commercial product. We were able to just it just got going. But it was about waiting and being patient. And so as a result, we've never brought the commercial products that you would normally bring in to get things started in a new winery. What
percentage of wineries, I don't know, it varies from Barossa to Clare to McLaren Vale, whatever, would be using roughly? I've no idea. Like bringing in those yeasts. Is it half? Is it 90%? Is it? I mean, generally, most people are doing that.
Well, look, if you think that, I suppose 80% of wine in Australia is made by the big four players, which would all be commercial yeast, and then it would be I don't know the split, but it's anyone who's doing artisanal handmade winemaking in a facility that's new to winemaking. It might be someone's back shed, or people make wine in lots of different places. Most of those people are trying to use wild yeast.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely, where possible. But it can be more difficult to manage because it's nature.
It's wild.
It's wild, and we don't. It's not doesn't do what it says on the back of the packet because there isn't one.
This is great because it's really reflective. I'm not surprised, but it's reflective of, I guess the courage and the trust and the doing less and the confidence required in growing food differently in a different way, which is much more in line with nature. That's part of the process.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not using a prescriptive recipe here. Sorry, is that Hamish over there? His big rig.
Yeah, I think it is.
He's in his new car. He's been showing off his new car for days.
It's quite smart. With that funnel on it.
It is. At least I know he's going to get to where he's supposed to be going now, which is great. It's not a prescriptive thing, which obviously, as you say, the outcome of that is not a cookie cutter.
No, it's not. You don't. I mean, it does crazy things to pH and
you were talking about the full moon the other day.
And yeah, we do. We notice that the ferments, and that's a fairly common observation.
Yeah,
that ferments will go pretty crazy in a full moon, but it's much more likely that would happen if you're wild yeast.
Because it's more responsive.
Because of course, yeah.
It's even it isn't it? It's pretty cool. Even that wild yeast is more in touch with what's going up there than the stuff out of the lab.
Without doubt, yeah.
Yeah. And so was that? I imagine that adds to the complexity of flavour. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
The wildness,
I think we would say it just makes sense because it matches up. So
that's what's sort of kind of supposed to happen.
If we want to make wines that taste of the place, that are really truly authentic wines of the place, we want to that we need to use the yeast that they've grown with, that's in there on their patch of land. It just sort of makes sense.
The companion yeast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it belongs.
Which goes with again, biodynamics. If one had cows on a vineyard, you'd use that cow manure because it's the biology. You're using the yeast.
Yeah.
You're using the grape mark, I imagine.
We are.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. So
that's going back. So
that goes back on. Yeah.
You're enhancing.
Yeah.
What's already there.
Yeah. It all sort of belongs in this place, and I think that's the point. Is that you can be, and I think listening to Hamish over these last couple of days, you can be quite. You need to look at your own farm for answers to lots of things, and build resilience. So it sort of makes sense.
What did you see here? What are there sort of some things that were off the, you came from a pretty clean slate anyway, but were there other examples of things that you went, I reckon we should try this or use that thing, or I don't know, other not so much ingredients but just other thinking or practices that as a result of being open-minded and not feeling like you had to be in control of everything, that you've done here? Any other sort of?
I think actually our use of fermentation of white wine on skins has been a really interesting and not a very conforming thing that we've done here. Semillon, which is the white variety grown in the Barossa, and we've got these lovely old vines out there planted back in the 50s. I sort of thought, why don't we try and make these like a red wine, and get, people are looking for texture and savouriness, and I am always looking for that in white wine. So I was partly driven by my own tastes and preferences, I suppose. But, Alberto, again, I asked him how to do it, and he said, I don't know.
You're mad.
No, he said, just do it, and then you'll work it out.
So what is that, fermenting on skin?
So usually
for the layman who just loves a good glass of
good shardy.
Anything, just loves drinking wine but doesn't know how it actually got in the bottle.
Yeah. Well, normally with white wine, certainly in most places around the world, you will press the juice out straight away. And then
of a white
grape. So you pick your grapes, they come in and you press them. And you take the juice and
within a day,
ferment
immediately?
Yeah, pretty much immediately.
You
might let them soak for a bit to, get a bit of texture and
a bit of wild yeast.
A bit of that, yeah.
Not too much bird poo, I hope.
Oh, we try and leave that out.
Phosphorus.
Spiders, small lizards.
Well, there would be when you're shaking or I guess you're getting that stuff, aren't you?
You are. But
a bit of wildlife.
Yeah, I think more so when you're machine harvesting. We hand pick it most of what we put through. So far all of what we put through here we hand pick. We do machine pick some of the fruit that gets sold. Which is fine, but hand picking does mean you get it slightly cleaner. And then we put it along a sorting table and we pick off the large spiders and other things. I don't actually do that myself. Johnny does that.
Who does, Johnny?
Johnny does that, and I scream. And
does he get bitten?
he wouldn't care.
Has he teeth? He would, I reckon.
He's
very authentic.
He is. He really is the real deal. He really is.
So spiders off.
Yep.
On the conveyor belt.
On the conveyor belt, up the little jingamy, and into the press, and press off the juice, get it into a tank, and then you have your primary fermentation, turning sugar into alcohol, and then you may or may not choose to put that white wine through that secondary fermentation stage that all red wine goes through. So instead of doing that, we thought, let's take the stems off and just have the berries, and let's ferment as whole berry, like you would do with a red wine.
So you didn't. So
we didn't do the pressing the juice out bit.
Instead of just taking the juice off and you actually.
We just put all the berries, and in fact, I love different vessels. As you can see up there, we've got tulips and eggs and amphoras, and I managed to find a Quevri from Georgia. Someone had brought them in to the country from someone in Sydney was selling them.
Are they those terracotta?
Yeah, they're terracotta, and they're shaped like a sort of teardrop. And I was able to get one of those over here, and they do make white wine in them in Georgia. So we just we just put the berries into that. You sort of macerate them a bit, so that they've got a bit of juice going on. And Johnny said this didn't come with a lid. He wasn't that impressed with the Quevri, I think it's fair to say. And I said, well,
incomplete.
You'll work it out. So he went to Bunnings and got a plastic flower pot base and some Play-Doh. And,
he got from his play box.
It's food grade, so that made a lot of sense. So we sealed it up and managed to off it went, fermenting and having a happy time.
Is it airtight?
Yeah, it is. It is.
So it's doing its stuff.
It is, but it did grow this sort of floor like you'd get on a sherry that protected it. So we didn't put any sulphur or anything like that. We just let it do its thing in there, and it's been fascinating. And we've had two. Now this is our third vintage of making Semillon like that, and people love it.
What colour is it?
It's white wine coloured with a tiny tinge of the one that we were left in there for 9 months has gone, sort of, well, it's not an orange wine because we sulphur before we bottle, but it has got that hue, that slightly orange hue to it.
Yeah, cool.
And to me it's delicious. It's got texture and savoury, and I think, I suppose that was a different thing to do.
And you're still allowed to call it, what was it?
Semillon.
Semillon. I mean, because that's the grape variety.
That's the grape variety.
Not necessarily what comes up the other, it's still because it's the grape variety, and just because it's been create a different way. It's still sold as that
Yeah,
kind of wine.
it is.
Still fits that category.
Yeah. Actually, the one that we did, we put a little bit of stuff that's grown on the fence line on the road, and that's got some Uni Blanc and Riesling in it. So we call that a field white because it's a white from the field.
Yeah, nice. And would someone taste that who's used to a particular style and go, hang on, this is different, you know?
Yes, definitely. They would think this is different. This is not what
You're an
I'm used to.
imposter.
Yeah, this is not what I'm used to tasting with Semillon.
Yeah, right.
And
Does that throw people out a bit?
look, I think with the people that we are selling into, like the restaurant guys, the somms, wine bars,
I probably think that's cool.
they love it.
Yeah.
They love it. So, and when people try things, when we show people here in the tasting room, they're really open. They're in a happy place.
Point of difference,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's – and look, like with everything in the wine business, it's lots of people do this kind of thing.
They're pushing the envelope.
Yeah, I think people are, but it's not something you see much in the Barossa, but certainly up in the Adelaide Hills, there's a lot of that.
Are you considered weirdos here because you're doing these things?
No.
Yes, you will now.
I don't. Oh God, I don't know what we're considered. No, I think. Actually, I think we are a deeply Barossa place, and I've had nothing but really positive interaction with with fellow Barossans those who've been here for many generations.
The Barossanese, I like to call
the
them.
Barossanese, and we're brand new, but I think people just have to come here and look at the changes that we've made to what was a very rundown old place, and we've restored health and beauty, and who can deny the benefits of that?
I have to say, I have not stood still for too long since we've been here. Angelica and I were here for a couple of days. I did a talk at the Barossa Cellars there. Thank you, Nikki and Sarah, for arranging that. And so speaking with grape growers and winemakers there, and Kaleskis and, quite a few other people in the neighbourhood, and they couldn't be more complimentary about what you guys are doing. I mean, there were a few that said some nasty things. No, they didn't. Now, what
I'll find out who they are.
we will have them removed.
Yes.
They will no longer be a Barossanese.
They will not.
They'll be.
All those generations that will have done nothing for them.
It doesn't count for anything. Actually, that is quite. But it's a bit like Burrawa. You've got to be here for 3 or 4 generations before you consider it like local.
I have never even set my sights on becoming Barossan because I know I'm too old, and it's. I mean, I just didn't get here. I mean, in fact, my great grandparents didn't get here. No, so I don't.
That's right. You're a couple of generations too late.
I am. Yeah.
Now, what I'd like to talk about too, talking about sort of points of difference is, and you gave Hamish and I, yourself and Dan gave Hamish and I a bit of a tasting last night of some wine, particular wine that you had sort of talked about, or more the sort of the some of the management practices and the day before. Can we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excuse me, dig into that, because I think it's not just a point of difference. For me, it blew my mind what you guys are doing, because it was like, yeah, of course you'd be doing that. Talking, we're referring to soil and, the characteristics that one can achieve and create and amplify and identify in a wine. Tell us now that I've talked it up, tell us what no what I'm even talking about. I think it's fascinating.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, where we're going.
So yeah, I was showing you through our Grenache Polygon wines, which is very different to what anyone really, I think, is doing in terms of the extent of detail that we're going into with this particular part of the project here. Again, Alberto had a friend, has a friend still, called Pedro, and Pedro Parra, who's a truly fascinating guy, and from Chile, but has become over the last few years, 10, 20 years, really the authority on looking at how soil and rock informs texture and taste of wine. And
that's cool.
Yeah,
how soil and rock informs texture and taste.
Yeah. So the French would call this terroir, and it's a very important term certainly in France, but all over the wine world. And I think we really are now living in a time when this is a word with huge meaning, because it talks about really going back to the land that you have and that you farm, and how you understand the changes in that land from really one patch to the next. I mean, scientists would call it patch dynamics. We call it terroir in the wine business.
Looking for more information to assist your regenerative journey? Come join Charlie and his guests around the kitchen table, an online community of supporters with exclusive access to the Regenerative Journey interview transcripts, live online Q&A sessions, a chance to engage with other like-minded people and more. Go to www.charliearnott.com.au/the kitchen table, and we look forward to sharing a yarn with you. Now let's get back to this week's episode.
I guess the French and the rest of the world have stolen that phrase.
Yeah.
It sounds cool. They've been using that for years and years.
Yeah.
In the wine in the bottle is a reflection of the soil, but you guys have taken it to another level.
We have. Well, we've been quite. I suppose we don't have. We don't have hundreds of years of farming on this particular piece of land, like in Burgundy, for example, where multi-generational families understand that this row here on Jean-Pierre's hill is different to the next road down, which is on Claude's hill. So, obviously they're two very different wines at very different prices, and that's just a very commonly understood thing that happens in Europe, certainly. And we wanted to, I suppose, understand that more quickly than we would have 100 years or 500 years to do it in, because, there's not time. We want to know now. And so Pedro started the process by having the whole farm scanned with electrical conductivity scanning, where it basically maps out where we have rock and clay versus sand and silt under the ground. And we have a creek that runs through the centre of the property, and what we were able to see there was that we have we have bloody microphone. We have sandy, silty stuff on one side, which is great. Grows good, rich Shiraz. And then on the other side,
and that's near the creek.
And that's near the creek. So it's alluvial, younger soils that would have come down with water movement, and
over many years,
and I'm talking a long time ago as well. But then on the other side of the creek, on the western side, we've got very old weathered rock. And clay. That's a combination of soil and clay.
It's so unique here. You've got your own.
It's not shale, and it's not clay, and it's not soil. It's clay.
That's it. You heard it here first, you
this
geologists.
This is a new terroir in Australia announced today called clay.
It's going to be sold. It'll be in all good wine stores in about 3 years' time.
Look out.
Well, Dan's going to love that.
He's going to die.
Why did I put you on there?
Why did I let this happen?
But you're better than you. You do a better job than him anyway, wouldn't you? He's going to hate you. I thought I'd be hanging around.
Well, he went to Oxford.
Checking.
He would be able to nail this without making that kind of terrible
of course. Okay, Clayle.
Back to Clayle.
This cool stuff called Clayle. Yeah.
With rocks, yeah. So on the western side, we've got rocks and clay and soils. So interesting. And the first time I saw this property, I loved the hilliness of it because I think where there are hills, there's more diversity. You just know that, I think, instinctively that, and you see it if you visit any wine region or any areas of viticulture around the world, you can see that hills always create diversity underground. So naturally on the side of the river that was hilly, we've got rocks and what Pedro said and has really explained to us is that rocks are interesting. Vines that grow in rocks properly, you get tension, you get minerality, you get energy, and the voltage that we were always looking for and that Alberto was always talking about.
Voltage, that's kind of...
Voltage.
Can you explain?
That's an Albertoism.
Is it? So voltage meaning energy or sort of like life, or what's voltage exactly?
Look, I think going back to maybe just even when you simply eat a tomato that is homegrown, you get that energy and flavour which is so different and is there as opposed to the supermarket
bland
okay. Red water. Yep. And it's even more of a thing with grapes because grapes are a particular fruit that ends up with huge layers of complexity if grown well. I'm not sure what would happen if you fermented a tomato, but I don't really want to think about that.
No. Yuck.
Yeah. Nice. But, and Hamish certainly talked about that a lot over these last 2 days about fruit. And I do think about that as energy in flavour. And I think that's certainly what we've been trying to achieve here, because if your fruit doesn't have flavour and energy and that special thing you get when you grow something in a healthy place and in healthy soil, you won't make great wine. It's impossible.
Is it like a vibrance or a...
Yeah, it's like a...
Yeah,
I suppose some people would say they can taste a sort of... I'll get into that when we talk about the different types of rock. But it's being able to make a connection with rock through tannin as well, because tannins are really important. Tannin gives wines a three-dimensional flavour as opposed to just a flat, sweet alcohol thing. So anyway, Pedro came out and we put in a whole lot of soil pits. So we had the maps. Pedro came and told us where to put the pits, and we put them all in, and he started going through and observing. And you can't do this unless you do the pit bit. You've got your map from the scanning, and then you've got to put the pits in, and he needs to stand and observe what the roots are doing from the vines in these pits and where they are living and how they are functioning. And then we can talk about irrigation. We can talk about things to do in the winery. And so it's not just, well, here's your vine and here's a piece of geology. It's actually going, well, in his experience, Grenache grown on schist and clay is going to have big flavour. And we're dealing with a hot climate, grey rocks, red clay, hot. Everything's hot. And he would say, let's cool this with a whole bunch. So we put stems into the fermentation, and that gives it a freshness. So his knowledge, as well as Alberto's, helped us to understand how to make fascinating wine from what we'd grown, which was already great. and interesting. But how to get the best, I suppose, out of our situation, which is determined by rock and soil.
Which sounds pretty unique. That the rock, I mean the patch, the corner, that part of the vineyard is obviously consideration. That's the block that a particular wine might be made from. But to actually dig a hole based on those maps, and then, because I imagine that one hole, even on the same part of the map that the map is telling you is the same, that could be different as well. Is that fair to say? Or are they reasonably similar? You've got the blue bit on the map, and it's pretty much it.
No, he wants to put the soil pits in where it changes on the map, so on the boundaries,
okay,
so that he can see what is happening from one spot to the next. And sometimes two sides of the soil pit, if we get in the right spot, will be completely different.
Isn't that cool? Boundary.
So we're looking at the edges, and so
if you're not living on the edge, you're wasting your time.
You are, absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
So he defined these things we call polygons, which are unbelievably small. So in 1.3 hectare block of Grenache, we've got 4 polygons, and
so they're just defining areas.
They're just irregular shapes. And then he said, now you will pick it and separately and ferment it separately, and then we'll see. And so the limestone is kept separate, and that makes us anywhere between 400 and 700 litres a year, which is, no one makes a wine that's that small in quantity. They do, but they're just mad like us, I suppose. That's a
very small batch.
It's a barrel. It's a 400. We bought a 500 litre old barrel, so that there was no oak character left. It's what we call a neutral barrel, and we had it reshaped. You just take some staves out, and a guy does it, and made into a 400 litre to fit the amount that we'd made from Polygon 3, and so that's all there was of that wine, and it depends on the season, of course. And so we keep Polygon 3, which is limestone with a little bit of schist, and we keep Polygon 5, which is schist and clay separate, because they're standout wines for their unique characters that are so reflective of those rock types. And then others we blend together because they look better together. So we sort of take a block apart according to rock. Then we look at putting it all back together again and experimenting and doing blending, and we then decide whether or not it looks better together or apart. And it's absolutely fascinating.
And that's in a block where you're doing that is in
1.3 hectares in that block.
And that's part of a bigger block.
It is.
That is
3 hectares.
3 hectares, yes. Which in traditional, once upon a time, that would have been all harvested as one and gone in the thing and turned into a, or probably half the vineyard.
Yeah, you do multiple blocks in one lot of harvesting, and they all go together.
And that turns into the wine of that season.
That's right.
From that variety.
Yeah, that's right.
So you're really breaking it down into literally reflecting of the micro parental rock map situation, which is kind of, as I said earlier on, preempting that is like, but isn't that that's true terroir, isn't it? Like that's otherwise, and I'm not being critical of other winemakers, and because that's just a traditional thing to do, but it's sort of there's some degree of homogenisation when you think about the diversity that is in those grapes before they get turfed in together.
Yeah. Look, it is a very specific kind of project, and it's not something that everyone can or would be interested in doing. It's where we're at because we're interested in, the land is timeless and we're not. So we should be making wines that are at least a reflection of the land, because it'll last forever if we look after it. But I think, I think people are a little bit jaded by the concept of, this is, a wine named after the winemaker's dog, and it's kind of cool. And what is that? That's fine, but I think serious wine, really serious wine, has to be about the land and about our understanding of it and our ongoing quest to know it and nurture it. And for me, it's much more rewarding than, I suppose, trying to promote a personality around wine of a human, which of course is common, but ultimately it's the land. We have to get back to the place.
The wine is the voice of that land in a way, isn't it?
It is.
It talks
it's the expression
and the taste.
Yeah. And I think if you can see a person in that, then we've slightly failed the land.
Overshadowed it.
Yeah, and that's not necessary, because the result, I think, from land will be better if we let. And that goes back to Alberto talking about how to do less in order to get that authentic expression of the place.
Don't put any barriers up for that to be expressed.
Yeah, that's right.
The oak, you're sort of homogenising or making overriding the natural characters by just applying a layer of oak.
Yeah, and which new oak will do, especially on a variety like Grenache. Some varieties can stand up to it more, but when I taste a wine, I want to taste the rocks and the voltage of the place. I want to taste a wine that I think has been kind of plugged into a place and is different because of that. Everybody can buy the oak from the same cooperage, and it's what's the point in doing all of this in our vineyard if it's all just going to taste like new oak? And I think what's really interesting as well about Alberto is that he's, along with the doing less, he also talks about making wine. If you make wine that's authentic to the place, you're not chasing the market. And I think that's really, that comes back as well to it. People will find it, and the market will find it. There will be a market. But if you chase the market, you're then changing yourself and your place. You're trying to adapt to make people, to make something you think will work. But markets have trends, and I think you if you can stick to that authentic idea, you will get there.
Your relationship to the landscape is not just economic.
No.
Grow grape, sell it, make money. It's ecological.
Yeah.
It's it's energetic.
Yeah.
It's geological.
Yeah.
Let's now swing to what are some of the things you guys are doing here, which is nurturing your landscape. You talked about sort of stepping away or doing less. What are the sort of other on ground things that you and the team are doing that are sort of
Yeah, we've got a creek line that runs through the property, so that's important because it's a sort of nature corridor and a water course. Well, it would have been, but there are a lot of dams upstream, so we don't.
I have not seen one creek since I've been here running or even have any water. I did cross a river. And I say river dubiously, somewhere between here and Clare on Sunday,
right, that
had some puddles of water in it. It looked like would have been a reasonably large river when it's had water in it. But I was fascinated. There's just no running water.
Well, it's a dry place, and we have had a couple of very dry years. And I think we thought last year was a normal season, but actually it was still dry. And it's a dry place, South Australia, and But there is a lot of damming upstream from here, which is a shame. But we do, in a wet year, we do see water come through. And we have, on that creek line, we have removed all of the non-native species, it was a lot of olive and dog rose, boxthorn, and we've taken all of that out. And we work with they were called the NRM. I've got another name now. And they have provided us with a lot of native grasses that we've now put in along the creek line. And we're about to get another lot of slightly larger bushes that will be at the sort of next level higher up from that. And we have planted about 2,500 trees around our new dam, most of which are working pretty well. We've still got a bit of non-native stuff in there that needs to come out. We did a project with trying to create places for the native Australian blue-banded bee. We put about 20 little bee hotels around the property.
What do they eat? What do they forage on? If you got that you got food?
We don't have food in the hotels. It's not that kind of hotel. It's more a hostel.
But what's in the environment that is encouraging them to stick around? You've got somewhere to stay now.
Yeah, got somewhere to stay and lay your eggs. That's the main thing. That they get. They need to be able to have a place to do that. They're solitary, and they love blue and purple flowers. So that back garden there is all the gardens are full of the colour of flowers and the types of plants that blue-banded bees love.
Yeah, cool.
And in summer, we have hundreds of them here in this garden. And it's amazing to see. They seem to kind of coexist with the European honeybees. And
cool. No fights over that flower?
No. I would say that the blue-banded bees come and go pretty quickly though. They sort of seem to be around for a month or so.
Yeah.
And then they go off and think about the next life, I suppose. And we're doing some. We did an extensive insect survey a couple of years ago to set a baseline, and the guy who did it, we've actually got now a sample of almost all of the insects, but there were 11,500 unique insects on this property.
Get out of here!
Amazing. Really? Incredible. I couldn't believe it. I thought
11,500
different.
How long did it take old mate with his net running around trying to catch them? Pin them on a board. I do that.
Like a year to get the report because I think it took him so long to compile the data. Incredible. So I've actually got like little tubes full of spiders in a box that he collected.
That blows my mind.
And it's incredible.
How many acres?
He did it on the 60 hectares we've got here, yeah. And he went all over. He had the yellow sticky stuff and he had a net and he had all sorts of traps and stuff.
Did you ever whistle to try and attract them or something?
I didn't like to get into that.
He had a suit. He dressed up like something. Did he?
He had a headpiece, I think. I'm not sure.
What does it look like? Like a big bee?
No.
Or was it a spider?
He was not in fancy dress. I'm not
trying to take the piss out of him. I think it's fascinating that someone can actually collect that.
Well, he was just so thorough. That was the thing. He was not going to stop until every last insect.
So I guess I also have those. They make the traps in the ground. They make those little. They literally, things that scurry and don't necessarily fly. They scurry across the ground and they slip into a trap. I've seen them before, the ground dwelling ones. That's incredible.
Yes.
And look, that's a real credit. And I don't know what the benchmark is, but that seems like a shitload. And that, in any event, is a wonderful indication of health.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I reckon.
Yeah. That's what he thought as well. But I think the point is what he did do was say you need to have a bit less of these and some more of these. And I think that comes down to continuing to develop areas of tree and bush and grass patches, so that there are sort of more islands within the vineyard than we've got, and
more like refuges.
Yeah, refuges.
Yeah, right.
So
of what was he suggesting? Bushes and shrubs.
Yeah, the couple of areas that we want to do the Christmas bush.
Oh yeah,
it's called, and they are very apparently. I know Prue worked a lot with that, and they're very beneficial. They're very good at attracting the right insects within vineyards.
Yeah.
So we'll redo that insect survey in a few years just to see how it changes. And that's the amazing thing about having a benchmark is it's your baseline. Yeah. And now we can watch over the years what we do and how what we do changes those populations.
And again, based on his advice and a bit of this and a bit of that, I mean, if you can crank down, I mean, not that you'd want to rest on your laurels, but gee whiz, that's a pretty high standard to start with, I imagine.
Yeah.
What are insect people called?
Entomology.
Entomologists. Any entomologists out there can tell us if that's good or not, then I'd be interested to know.
Yes.
Because that just seems like a shitload.
Well,
I'm sure there'd be some farms there wouldn't be 11,000 individual insects on their farms.
No.
Just because of
potentially not because of the and I think the guy who owned the property before us was he wasn't big in, he didn't use any chemical and he had moved away, so it was
the legacy of
it hadn't been sprayed for. We don't know exactly how many years, but they're just it was a slightly abandoned place in a way. So it had, or neglected, I think, is more the word. So we had which was a great benefit to us because we don't have that history of chemical use here.
Not having to undo that.
No.
So what else? Using biodynamics, you've been into that for some years.
We have. Yeah. David Paxton was our first viticultural advisor here, and he encouraged it. Alberto encouraged it, and we were certified in 2018. So we really, from the very beginning, we started using the 500 and 501.
And what was the catalyst for going? Yep, we just wanted David come here and give us some tips. Or what was the Was it advice? Someone said, "Oh, you should," or you'd read about it, or what was the sort of catalyst?
It was definitely Alberto, and also the owner Alejandro is very much of the view that if you can, you must be organic at least. So I think that's a sort of general policy and a mode of operating within our broader wine business. And Alberto was very much, and it made sense to me. I mean, I had to learn about mycorrhizal fungi in order to make that connection between why the plugged-in vine needed to be organic, at least, because we need those populations of that microbial life going on in the soil to be feeding it. And in order to get the complexity that we're looking for and the uniqueness of place that we're looking for. So I think, Alberto always said it's a hot, dry climate, you can be organic. And then David Paxton was a great choice because of his organic practices, but he was also biodynamic. So he just said, why not? And I suppose I'm kind of at that point also where it's sort of more not why, but why not?
Yeah. Well, as Hamish says, you'd be mad not to.
Yeah.
Given the sort of it's cheap, it's cost effective. It's a lot of it is to do with stepping out, and it's a philosophy of less is more, and the use of ingredients that you source from the farm.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I bang on about it for 2 days.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
It makes total sense to me, and I think it just makes sense. I like the idea that we have an opportunity to make our own, I suppose, not stimulant, but that's not the right word, but something that we can use to help our soils develop that life in them, the water retention that we so desperately need to be able to develop here. That makes total sense as well. Anything that saves us water in this part of the world is just there's just no excuse, I don't think.
As we talk about, it's an offering, isn't it? It's an
offering.
It's a substance, but it's an energetic side of it. It's a sign of compassion. It's a give back. It's an acknowledging of what nature's giving us.
I think instinctively it just feels kind of right.
What else felt kind of right in the last couple of days? Any other sort of nuggets of gold that you stumbled upon? My bum's sore. Oh, yeah. It's getting cold. Better shift around there. Any nuggets?
Gosh, there were so many. It's really hard to pull out specific things. I'd already done an introductory course, but it was quite a while ago now. But it was good to have that base understanding. And because I think when you first do this, you go, whoa, that's what? Saturn and the moon and so having that baseline understanding and having been doing it here for 5 years, I felt like I wasn't starting from scratch, and I could get into more of the complex areas. And I found the session today on understanding the calendar really useful, because that is one complex piece of kit. And so that was great to go through that. And it's just those small things like don't do this during a full moon or a new moon. Just avoid that. Yeah. And that was really interesting. The Saturn opposing moon is super interesting as well. I think, and looking at that planetary I'm just really, again, I'm early days in going to that next level of understanding about biodynamics. So, I think it's good. I think it's good for my guys who sat in on it. They were really keen to do that. They wanted to be involved, and they were very engaged, I thought, with it as well.
Totally.
I think also what was really, really great about Hamish was that the constant 80%. I took away the 80% rule.
80% of something's better
than nothing. Yeah. I really like that. Yeah. And I think, what did you say? Perfection is the
enemy of progress.
Another.
Which is a not dissimilar.
Yeah, similar concept. Yeah, and right. I think we need to be like, we have to think that way.
Give it a shot.
Yeah, just give it a go. And I'm going to take that bag of stuff to my garden, actually.
I think you should.
We've just ripped out everything and about to have new shed and fence put in, and so we're going to have to replant, and it's going to be a biodynamic garden. It's nice one. It's not huge, but it's And
you'll do it soon, Get it prepped for whatever then goes in and whatever goes on there.
Yeah.
Oh, nice
so
one. Now tell me, I'm just conscious of the time. Sun is definitely gone.
Yeah.
There are members or attendees of our course waiting. So I'd say very patiently at the pub. I'd be probably happy if we were another hour. What are you? Anything you're irate about at the moment? Just to get back to Amelia. I've been talking about our Alkena for a while. What about you? Anything you're irate about? I don't want to know about Russell and stuff. Anything in the world.
Kids. Don't get me started.
Okay, that's another show. No, in the industry, in the Barossanese peoples. I don't know.
No.
Government.
No, I'm not. I'm not a really irate person.
You don't have to be irate about it.
Yeah, look, I've got things. I've got things that concern me, that are going on in the world. I mean, there's so much. I'd like to see a I'd like to see a better progress in reconciliation in this country.
Hey, we didn't get to that,
between our First People and between many people in this country. I'd like to see that, and I think there's a big conversation, but that's something that I think as guardians of for me as a kind of guardian of a piece of land on behalf of the owner, Alejandro, I certainly think that the deep connection that we're trying to achieve and that we want to achieve is something that I would love to have more informing from its Indigenous past than I think we have or can have access to or are at the point where that conversation is happening naturally in Australia in the mainstream. So I think we've just got so much work to do there.
You have been doing some work in that space, so because you had a visitor on Saturday.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Auntie Pat Warrior Reid came out to talk to Dan and myself. She's a Ngadjuri elder, and it was the first time that we've managed to have an elder of the traditional owners of this country here. I enjoyed so much having the chance to talk to her. She's a very beautiful person. We had a drive around. We sat up on top of the hill and looked out over the country, and we talked about listening, keeping our minds and our ears open. For those ancestors and for...
You got a few here?
For those men chattering down on the creek line. And, it was just it really resonated with me. And I suppose my great hope is that my children see our Indigenous history as their history. And that's where I think we have to get to. We've got to stop thinking about them as two separate things. And I do think I think there's great. I have great hope that will come.
Optimistic.
Yeah.
We kind of has to in a way. Otherwise, we're not.
We have to in order to go forward. Is my feeling.
To be fair, not just to be fair, but just to be respectful, but just to be. What's the word? Not the best we can be, but just to be. I mean, why wouldn't we? We're all the same. We are of one race, the human race. And
exactly.
and as those who are currently the stewards of the landscape, to be ignoring the thousands of years of history and the experience and the wisdom of management of this would be foolish.
I agree. I think there's so much for us to learn. I can understand though that as Hamish was saying yesterday, it's not that easy to get that conversation going. There's there's mistrust. There's a lot of a big past there. But as I said to Auntie Pat, there are lots of people like me who want to talk to people like you.
It's just that line of sight is not clear, though, is it?
No.
And there are, there are people and organisations that are making that a little easier, I trust, and that's really positive, because once upon a time it would have been quite the opposite.
Oh, you would know exactly. But we need to find a way where we can open up these.
Well, Hamish is a great one to talk to you about. I'm using the word etiquette, but it's not so much etiquette. It's just the approach. Like what's the respectful, understood, acceptable approach to doing that, and I don't understand it either. And I'm feeling most underqualified, as I've said before, about being a farmer or caring for landscape and country. I feel very underqualified. To not to manage it, but to understand it. I'm still in the learning phase, and underqualified to sort of talk on that level playing field. I don't accept that I am, because I need to learn. I'm also very conscious, and I think this is something Hamish talks about too, is that it's not a one-way thing. It's not as though us learning from them, and it's not so much them learning from us. It's more, it's how can we support, how can we stand together and supporting each other, Indigenous cultures, supporting our increased understanding, but us supporting them in I don't know, giving them opportunities, like what Rebecca and Damien are doing with Wandu,
Amazing.
And just sort of that's and they're here doing the course. And that's fantastic. That's sort of a collaboration.
Oh, look, they're
co-culture is what they call
exactly.
It.
They are, and they're a brilliant couple, and I think it's taken them a while to arrive at that idea, and for Rebecca to feel comfortable, and as if she can belong to that, and so. They are for me represent so much hope and of how the future can look. And I was talking to Rebecca and Sonia, who brought up Auntie Pat about the potential to bring young winemakers from Indigenous backgrounds in. To we can't be hung up on stereotype. We've food, and I think fine wine are that is about country are amazing platforms for talking about similar interests and motivations.
It's a great conduit, a great platform.
Yeah.
Did Indigenous people here? In Australia, I know elsewhere they sort of had sort of a fermented or an alcoholic beverage and things. Do we know if that was?
I have read that in northern parts of Australia, yes, but I just don't know. I'm not sure the answer to that.
Yeah, cool. Rebecca and Damien.
Yeah, they would know. Yeah.
Hey, Amelia, this has been wonderful. We probably should wrap it up. Here's one last one for you. Mm-hmm. If you could put a billboard up beside the, is it Sturt Highway? What's the one that goes north of Adelaide?
Is
it Sturt? Oh. I always get them mixed up. Sturt. Anyway, the big highway. Sturt, the big highway.
Oh, I'm confused now. It's just a road out there.
The big road out the front.
Yeah.
Big billboard saying anything you wanted to say that was of value, to those passers-by, what would you have on there? A quote, a question, a statement. No rude pictures.
Well, there is one that says Penfolds, so that probably wouldn't be my choice.
Is that rude?
There is.
That's rude.
No, it's been there for decades.
All right.
It's a piece of history. It's fine. I think I'd just put two words. My favourite two words, which are optimism and gratitude. And I'd just, so that people could stop and think about those two words in a world of so much negativity. I come back to those two words with myself, with my kids. There's so much to be optimistic about, and we can't be pulled down. And there's also a lot to be grateful for.
Totally.
And so that's not a really cool quote that I'll think of one in the middle of the night.
Hey, can you replace that one? Well, I, for one, optimistic about what you guys are doing here, and I'm grateful the fact that you've spent an hour and a half with me this afternoon.
It was a pleasure.
And I have to say, what a wonderful 5 days now? 5 days I've been here.
But you've settled in.
You're not going to get me out of there. No way. You have to get a bloody crowbar to get me out of there. And I've loved it, and it's been fantastic. And thank you so much for your time. And thank Dan and Tim and Johnny for their
Cynthia.
And Cynthia, of course, cooked up a feed and a half for the last couple of days.
She's the glue that holds it all together.
That is a way to a man's heart is through his stomach, and she certainly did that. So thank you, Cynthia, and we hope that's not the last feed we experience of yours.
I hope so too.
Cool. I reckon we'll come back and do some other stuff.
Yeah,
We'll work that out. Maybe when it's a bit warmer.
Yeah. Not. Don't come in the middle of summer though, because this is
gets cooked. Yeah. We'll get.
We'll have a pool. We'll have a pool.
Oh yeah.
One day. I mean, I'm working on it.
And a helicopter. Johnny wants a helicopter.
Oh, Johnny's dreaming.
I kind of think you're right. Amelia, thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Thank you, Charlie.
And next week on The Regenerative Journey, you'll have the pleasure, and I had the pleasure of speaking with Marcus Pearce at the farm at Byron Bay. Near where Marcus lives, we spoke about his new book, Your Exceptional Life, his life, and what a motivated, enthusiastic, inspiring guy. Marcus Pearce, next week on The Regenerative Journey.
This podcast is produced by Rhys Jones at Jaeger Media. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to subscribe, share, rate and review. For more episode information, please head over to www.charliearnott.com.au.